Welcome to another episode of FTA Global Marketing Stack 2025. I'm your host Yatin Basin, Vice President Sales and Marketing, FTA Global. The role of a CMO is changing rapidly. Gone are the days when brands would rely on one single full-time marketing leader to bring impact, feel that his presence or her presence will bring all the impact in the business and will drive results. Today, the businesses require flexibility, they require speed, they require deep impacts. And that's where the fractional CMO comes into picture. A leader who would step in, deliver results, bring impact, all of it without looking at the structural changes, without looking at the traditional leadership material. To discuss this topic in detail, we have with us Ms. Anjali Gupta, founder of the Fractional CMO Company. With the experience of working with brands like Sify Technologies, Kindle, and IBM, she's one of the person who could do storytelling, demand generation, and digital transformation in all go. Welcome to the show, Anjali.
Thank you, Yatin. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You had a fantastic stint at Sify Technologies. I think we worked together as well.
Yeah.
What gap did you see in the market that you were trying to fill because of which you started the Fractional CMO Company?
I get that question a lot, and I love that question.
We'd love to hear from you on that.
Yeah, so I think while I was still at Sify, I happened to attend a startup event.
Okay.
And pretty much every startup company that I met had the same problem statement. They said they either needed marketing help or they said they had marketing help, which was not enough, or it was not driving impact.
Okay.
So very clearly, the gap was there. Having said that, as I started to talk to more people and sort of do a discovery process in terms, I couldn't just quit my job and jump into it head on, right? So as I started to talk to more and more people, I realized that the gap didn't just exist with startups.
Okay.
It also existed with mid-sized company looking to scale or grow, right? The gap also existed in large enterprises where they had a full-time CMO, but they were looking to, do some strategic project or focus on something that the rest of the team didn't have bandwidth on.
Okay.
Or they needed a skill set that the current team didn't have. So the gap exists everywhere in different disciplines or different aspects of marketing.
So, follow up to what you just said, many of our audience may feel what really sets a fractional CMO apart from a regular one, right? What are those core differences between a fractional CMO versus a full-time CMO? Could you throw a little light on that?
Yeah, I mean, the differences again depend on what you're looking for. But I think one or two of the biggest differences is that a fractional CMO has diversity of experience. Any fractional CMO that's coming in, an experienced fractional CMO would have worked in multiple organizations as a full-time CMO or even as a fractional CMO. So the diversity of experience that comes in is very, very vast. Point number two, I think the bigger difference, another difference that a fractional CMO brings in is perhaps agility. Okay. The urgency of driving impact perhaps lies more with a fractional CMO than a full-time CMO. So these are the two big differences I see.
Well, that's quite a nice perspective.
Yeah.
See, when we look at large organizations, you mentioned enterprises, right? Some of them would feel that impact can only be generated if a CMO is full-time, sitting full-time in the office, or maybe attending all the boardroom meetings, right? For such organization, or maybe the C-suite or the board, how do you bring that, the core value, that if a CMO is fractional, still it's valuable to the organization? How do you make them understand of the value of the whole concept?
A fractional CMO is not looking to replace a full-time CMO in every instance, right? There are some instances where you still need a full-time CMO, right? But there are other instances, like when I was telling you earlier about how I discovered gaps in the market, there are such instances where a fractional CMO comes into play, right? So for instance, while there is a client I work with that I cannot name,
That's fine.
they have a full-time CMO, and I have been brought in for some strategic projects.
Okay.
Right? There is also a client where I am only coming in for a very specific period of time to build and grow the brand, and the community.
Okay.
Right? So I think fractional CMO comes in with a very, very specific objective. The conversations that I have with companies for onboarding me are very specific to a particular objective. Whereas a full-time CMO has a sort of more vast, sort of more widespread agenda and a more long-term agenda. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
No, you have definitely. See, that brings me to another question that I have, right? When we look at C-suite, any key position that gets hired in C-suite has a value and has a long-term goal for the brand, right? Coming from the same lens, when we're looking at CMOs, especially fractional ones, right? If we were to hire somebody as a CMO, there are supposed to be certain success metrics that we as a brand would like to understand and evaluate the person on. How does those get differ when it comes to fractional CMO?
they don't actually.
Okay.
They don't, because it depends on what your objective is. You know, if you're looking to build a brand, if you're looking to create a brand, then whether it's a full-time CMO or a fractional CMO, you still have to create that brand. If you're looking to grow the brand, then very specifically, it will be a very outcome-driven approach. So that holds good both for a full-time CMO and a fractional CMO. So I would actually urge people to not think of a fractional CMO and a full-time CMO with such a wide or sort of difference. There is not that much of a difference, other than the fact that a fractional CMO perhaps doesn't only work for one brand and perhaps doesn't spend 24/7 thinking only about that one brand. So I think one needs to understand that a fractional CMO may be only spending part of his or her time with a particular brand. But having said that, the belief, the investment of time, effort, value will still remain that much of a full-time CMO. That's what I believe.
Okay. That's a nice perspective. And I think I hear it more often now because a lot of people have started getting into, fractional CMO roles. From an outsider's perspective, right? People often feel that fractional roles lack on consistency. Sometimes you'll look at agility, you look at the attractiveness of the role, but however, when you look at a brand and its long-term goal, like building brand equity or focusing on short-term marketing campaigns or maybe certain initiatives, this consistency could play a major role there. Do you think it's a right opinion
So
or a
there's a
narrative?
history to this.
Okay.
Right?
We would
There's a
love to know about it.
history. There's a history to this. So I believe that's a misconception.
Okay.
Okay. I believe that just like you've had fractional CFOs, fractional legal heads in businesses for many years now, fractional CMOs also may be coming in a fractional capacity, but that does not mean that there cannot be longevity.
Okay.
There have been instances I've seen where CMOs have come in for they're spending a fraction of their time on a particular brand, but for long periods of time, right? So that's point number one.
Okay.
Point number two, very clearly, is that if you look at a platform like the Fractional CMO Company, one that I am building and trying to grow, right? We come with the idea that we can help you build your brand, we can help you grow your brand, we can help you provide growth to the business. So all of this can take time. So a fractional CMO does not mean that you only come for a short period of time. It means that you spend a fraction of the time at a fraction of the cost, but it could continue for a long period of time as long as you're creating impact. I think the focus has to be on what kind of impact you're creating rather than the amount of time you're spending.
Okay. See, my next question is coming from an angle wherein I'm not talking about CMOs only. It's for the entire piece, which is fractional leadership roles, right? It could be a CEO, it could be a COO, right? I'm not sure how feasible these two roles would be, but again, from the same angle, except for the cost benefit, right? What additional benefits or advantages does a fractional leadership role bring for the company?
Actually, there is feasibility in even bringing in a fractional CEO.
Okay.
Because having said that, to answer your question, agility is one. Because I think as fractional C-suite, you tend to do a lot more in that short period of time, right? calculating impact, looking at impact. I've spoken about it earlier also. I think when you come in a fractional C-suite role, you focus more on the impact than you focus on the time that you've spent, right? Very importantly, Yatin, it's the experience.
Okay.
The diversity of experience that a fractional role brings in, and why people are even willing to bring in a fractional role, a fractional CMO, a fractional CFO, a fractional CEO, is because of the diversity of experience that somebody brings to the table.
Okay. Can you elaborate on that a little for our audience? I think it's one of the topics that most of us would want to know. In fact, I would like to get enlightened on this, if possible.
So I'd love to share my own personal story,
Please.
right? So why did I get into fractional
That'll
CMO
be one of the best
mode?
analogy.
Why did I get into the fractional CMO mode,
yeah.
right? I have been in the tech industry for 25, 26 years now, right? From B2B marketing. And I think at some point I felt like I could do more than just work with one brand.
Okay.
The need for me to work with multiple brands, the need for me to work with multiple sizes of organizations, the need for me to work with multiple different industries and provide the learnings of B2B tech in perhaps some of those industries urged me to do this. Now, I find that the brands that I talk to also see value in that.
Okay.
And I suppose it's the same for CFOs, the same for CEOs. The learnings that they get from all these other interactions create a lot of value for the brand that they're working with.
Interesting. So you worked with big brands, right? Sify, I think, was the last venture in terms of data center. Whenever we are talking about data center, Sify is one of the prominent names, right? I think before that it was Kindle and then IBM, right? IBM. If we were to look at your P2B learning as a marketer, right? What are those key lessons that you bring on the table as a fractional CMO if one would hire you?
So these are two different phases of my life.
Agreed.
Right?
That's why I want you to create an intersection of it, right?
Yeah. So prior to Sify, most of the brands that I worked with were large international MNC brands, right? And what these brands do when you work for them in India is they train you. You learn the best of everything. You learn how to create a brand. You learn how to build a brand. You learn how to grow a brand in a local market. You learn things like automation. So everything I learned on marketing automation, data analytics, new age marketing. We used to call it the new worker marketing in IBM. I learned from IBM. And I extended that, when Kindle launched, imagine taking that one spin-off of IBM, that new brand into all these different markets, right? And I used to work for Asia Pacific in Kindle, so you can imagine the scope of work over there. But then came Sify. That was the real proof of the pudding. It was taking the learning that I had at IBM and Kindle that had trained me so well to do all of the things that a CMO needs to do that I could apply in Sify. In Sify, I didn't have a global team that I needed to go to for validation. I was the global team, right? In Sify, I didn't have anyone I needed to go sign off on a campaign. I needed to do that and then justify both the spend and bring in the ROI. So Sify was a very, very interesting learning ground for me. And I think both these phases or experiences in my life, which was the global brands and the Indian brand that is global, has helped me put that into action and help serve smaller brands who are looking to, again, create, grow the brand or even grow demand.
You talked about demand generation. I think I would like to leverage this situation a little more. Somebody who's done demand generation for brands like IBM and Kyndryl, and that too on a global level, right? Want your perspective on the old playbooks, right? If you look at demand generation, right, compared today with, say 5 years ago, newer rules have come into picture. The old playbooks have faded completely, or if not completely, then they are at the verge of getting faded completely. How do you think a fractional CMO would bridge the gap or would navigate through these complexity and would still deliver what a brand would require him to do?
Actually, it's a very interesting question and something that I've thought about a lot when I came into the space 6-7 months ago. See, Yatin, there was a phase when I started my career 25, 27 years ago, where it was all about the brand.
Okay.
right? I mean, what was the marketing we did then? We did advertising. Websites were just coming up. I'm talking about, and I don't know what demographics your audience is, but I'm talking about the early 2000s where
Just
websites,
marketers,
yeah, yeah,
could be some of our peers, some people who are joining right now. I mean, whatever we see right now could probably be future for somebody
right,
who's listening this
right.
podcast right now.
So when I started my marketing career, websites were just coming in.
Okay.
Like websites were one-page HTML pages that somebody just scrolled down on, and that's it. That was
You're
a
referring
website.
to early 2000s,
I'm
right?
referring
Yes.
to 2000, 2001, right? Now, at that time, marketing was very, very what we call basic today. And then moved to 10 years from then, marketing automation came in, digital came in, paid media came in, and everybody started focusing on that.
Agree.
And I remember a time when all the CFO wanted to know was, I'm giving you 10. Are you able to bring in 5 times the amount of revenue? So then we started looking at funnels. We started measuring everything, even things perhaps that we shouldn't be measuring. We started measuring, right?
Oh, agree. When you don't know what would bring impact, you all of a sudden start looking at other avenues as well.
Correct.
So I think it's a human trait.
Right? So now what has happened is that over the last 25 years, we've seen marketing evolve from just doing brand to doing only performance marketing. There was a time when people had forgotten that something called a brand exists. They only did performance marketing.
Agree.
They wanted to measure every impression, they wanted to measure every click and what outcomes that is driving to their funnel. Having said that, we are now entering a time where marketing has become very human centric, and we are weighing, as marketers, we are weighing in, when do we need to focus on brand, when do we need to focus on performance, and therefore overall creating demand, right? Recognition, reputation, relationship, and revenue. These are the 4 R's that I talk about, right? You have to now focus on all of them. And I think what a fractional CMO, because most fractional CMOs and any fractional CMO worth their salt would have come in through all of this experience. And so the value that they bring to the table would be a recognition that marketing is not just about performance campaigns. Marketing is about building a brand, and so therefore recognition, building reputation, building relationship with your customers, and therefore at the end, bringing in revenue.
Couldn't agree more. I think marketing is no longer a support function, and every dollar spent on marketing has to return.
Marketing has become a strategic function, Yatin. Marketing is a strategic. They have a seat on the table in the CEO's office. In fact, it's interesting because one of the clients that I work with very closely insists that marketing gives direction to sales. You remember a time when sales would come to marketing and say, oh, we should do a roundtable, or hey, we should do that. Times have changed, and how? It is now marketing telling sales what to do, what to pitch, which customer to go after, because they have customer insight, they have account insight. They have all these tools, and they have AI now telling them how to find the right customers, where to find the right customers. And so now the direction is going from marketing to sales. It's a very interesting shift that is happening, which is why marketers are now also becoming responsible for growth.
Well, I take care of both the verticals at FTA Global, so I know how these two works, and there's a constant juggle between both, right? But the whole idea is throughout the day to strike a balance between both the teams, right?
Yes.
And I think that's where cross-functional team collaboration comes into picture as well.
Yeah.
This brings me to another concept. We are a full-time digital agency and very hands-on kind of a firm, right? If I go back 10 years, right, people used to say, I just want to be featured on those 10 blue links on Google. But today our conversation don't even start from that. We start from, what are we going to do about LLMs? There are quite a few platforms, they've grown in few years, the kind of market share they have, the kind of adoption rate they have, that has increased humongously, right? For us as marketers, it becomes difficult to understand which platform should get priority. So in that situation, we look at the data, we do competition research, we do mapping on, certain areas wherein we map 2 brands against the best in the category, right? And that's how we get a lot of data insight. I think from that standpoint, your answer, is completely bang on and stands still, right? Now, a follow-up question, right? if you've seen bigger brands, right, culture is something which is rooted in new age companies. Especially if I talk about startups, they talk about culture as one of the core pillars that they are trying to build. Especially when it comes to Gen Zs coming into picture, this is one of the added checklist which they actually evaluate before joining a company, right? But if you speak to any, seasoned marketer, or perhaps if you speak to any seasoned COO of a company, you would say culture is not built, by somebody who's not part of the organization, right? So we need somebody who's completely dedicated towards the brand. That's where I somehow see a gap. Maybe if you could, let me know what your thoughts
That's
are
an
on this.
interesting question, right? I mean, I would say that again, I want you to, when we talk about fractional CMOs or fractional CXOs, we are not talking about their lack of commitment or lack of investing their mind space, time, etc., in an organization. We are simply saying that they are not spending all their time only with one brand.
Okay.
So, for instance, if I'm actively working, me myself, right, not my company, but I as an individual, I'm actively working with 3 clients right now. My dedication and my focus on each of those 3 will be like that of a full-time person, right? Now, how do I build the teams within that? Now, fractional CMOs work with multiple models. Sometimes we manage teams that are already existing, right? So that is fairly straightforward. Then you have to win trust. So it's like what any full-time person will do, except you're not with them all 8, 9, 10 hours of the day. You're with them for 3 hours of the day, right? But to be having the ability and the maturity to build that trust, to continue that engagement when you know they need you, that is one where you have a team in that company, right, with your client. There are also models where you build the team in your own company. Then it's fairly straightforward because that team works for your organization and supports the client organization.
Got it.
There are also models where you hire freelancers, right? You are not really hiring anybody full-time in any of these companies. You are simply hiring freelancers to do that job. Those, again, depends your relationship with those freelancers and how you have nurtured that, built that. So like any other company or any other model or any other fractional role, it really depends on the individual, how they are able to show their commitment to that brand.
Perfect. I'm going to ask a out of syllabus question, I think, out of curiosity. Okay. Let me know if you want to answer that. So, looking at what you just said, Anjali, do you think a fractional role, I'm not specifically talking about CMO here, is for a brand that is going through merger or maybe an acquisition?
Yes. And I'll tell you why. Because a company that is going through something drastic like this, right? Change. You could bring in a fractional role, whether that's a CFO, whether that's a CEO, whether that's a strategy head, whether that's a CMO, who has that expertise. In fact, I believe that when you have such instances, a fractional role works a lot better because that person comes in with that very expertise for a short period of time to take you all through that transition. And I'll tell you the big difference between consultants do that. But the big difference between consultants and a fractional fractional role, C-suite role, is that consultants only give advice. They only work on the strategy. Whereas a fractional C-suite role, I believe, is not only meant for strategy and giving advice. That person also helps you go through the transition, helps you execute. Okay. So I think in special instances like this, fractional roles become all the more important.
I think valuable insight on that. I would like to circle back to our boardroom talks, right? It's 2025, right? If you were to look 10 years from now, how do you see boardrooms would look like? Currently, we're talking about fractional CMO. Perhaps a couple of years down the lane, we'll have roles for CEOs, CIOs, and maybe CEOs as well, right?
Yeah.
How do you think, how do you envisage the entire boardroom looking like in such scenario?
Again, it'll vary. There will be companies which will have no fractional roles, maybe one or two odd fractional roles. I know of a very large company that has a fractional CFO, I beg your pardon, and that CFO has been in that company in a fractional capacity for over 15 years.
Okay.
So again, like I said, the longevity is not what we need to focus on. The value and the commitment is one needs to focus on, right? Now, to come back to your question, I don't believe there will ever be a situation where the full boardroom is all fractional roles. But where need be, some companies will have more and more fractional roles, because I also believe, like the West, this is a very popular concept in the US and Europe right now. I think India also will see the value of bringing in fractional roles. Now, what I would like to say, though, is that it is also dependent on the folks who are taking on fractional roles.
Okay.
Is this a filling in the gap in their life situation, or is this something that they want to do full time? Pardon the pun on full time and fractional. Do they want to do fractional full time?
I think these are larger topics to cover, but again, I got your point from where you're coming from.
Right.
So if I was to ask you for one piece of advice that you would want to give to people who are considering becoming a fractional CMO or maybe any fractional leadership role, what would that be?
2 pieces of advice.
Okay.
One is fractional CMO or fractional CXO does not mean a lack of commitment.
Okay.
In fact, it means more commitment, because in a fraction of the time, you have to deliver the same value. Okay. And the second one is related to my last statement. Focus on value, not on the time you spend.
Okay.
So every fractional role must focus on the value they bring to the table rather than the time. I think the focus is too much on time. The focus is too much on the part-time aspect of it. And I'm shocked you haven't brought out the aspect of cost, right? Because that's the first thing people say, we should get a fractional role because it'll be a portion of the cost. Not necessarily, because cost is also dependent on what value you're committing to bring to the table. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. It definitely does. I think for our viewers, this advice is good, but I think I'll be delivering a half-baked advice if I won't talk about those skills or traits that you think the next generation CMOs should have, especially in the flexible models that we are talking about.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can call this a skill, but I would just say that I've met a lot of fractional CMOs who in the last 6 months, who perhaps are filling in a gap, which is they are taking up fractional roles because they don't have a full-time role, and therefore between 2 full-time roles now I believe that so this has actually been a downside for me, because when I go and speak with prospects or prospective clients, a lot of them have actually said, hey, we had a fractional CMO and it didn't work out because he or she left within 6 months of joining, and there was no continuity, right?
Okay.
So I would say to anyone who is wanting to do this, if you are looking at it seriously, commitment of time is definitely one. A streak of entrepreneurship and ownership is very, very critical, because when you sign up on a fractional capacity, you perhaps need to prove yourself a little more and a little harder than an employee does, a full-time employee does.
Agree. I think you have to prove, an extra mile.
Exactly. Agree. Right? Because you don't want to give the impression that you are not in it completely, 100%. And again, I'm not talking of time. No, I'm talking of commitment. Right? So, yeah.
So we are towards the end of the session, but I think we've come into a different zone altogether. You're talking about pitches, right? So I would like to gather your point of view on certain topics. If at all you're open for it, I would like to, talk about a couple of aspects, maybe like 4 to 5 questions. Sure. And if you could share your perspective in 1 or 2 lines, I think that'll be great, right?
I'll try my best.
Okay, that's fine. So I'll make it a little easy for you.
Huh.
Imagine I'm a CEO of a new age startup, worried about the growth of my company, right? How will your how will your fractional CMO pitch would look like if you're delivering that pitch to me and convincing me, Yatin, I'll get this done. Don't worry about the growth. How would this look like?
Well, I would say fractional, perhaps in time,
Okay.
but commitment, value, outcomes in full.
I think you've covered it all in bold, and the mandate is yours.
headline.
Let us shortlist the resumes then. So, one underrated skill that every marketing leader should have today.
Sales.
What makes you say that?
Yeah, sales. Because whether fractional or full time, I think a marketer's role today has become so sales driven. Number one, is this a short answer or a long answer?
Feel free. I think
Okay, so
it was meant to be short, but I won't restrict you.
I'd like to go long on this one, right?
Go ahead.
For years, we've seen marketers, like I said, I think I said it earlier today, we've seen marketers take direction from various businesses, right?
Okay.
We have reached that point where marketing has a seat on the table and marketing is giving direction, right? Now, having said that, the reason why I say sales is that we've reached a point where we have had the ability, or we have developed the ability, to sell our strategy to the board, to sell what was considered a cost center to becoming a value center to the board. So it has been all about selling.
Agree.
When we go to talk about, when we do a new pitch to the CFO, we have to sell that to the CFO. Okay. Because the CFO is always going to look at how much spend marketing is doing. But how do you sell the value that marketing is bringing to the table? So slightly long answer, but I think sales
summed up really well. Since it was about sales, I enjoyed it somehow, right? So one misconception about fractional CMO that you really would want to see disappear, in fact, almost immediately.
That we are not committed. Fair point. Yeah, that we are not committed, or that we don't, we only give strategic advice. No, we are fully committed. And we also execute end to end.
What would you choose between agility and continuity? One word.
Agility.
Okay.
Agility.
So if you opened a business magazine in 2030, 5 years from now, right? What headline about marketing would you like to see on the front page?
Wow. I don't know about 10. Did you say 10 years from now?
No, just about 5.
5 years?
We can do both. I mean, you can share your perspective for 5 and then 10 years and maybe 15
I don't even
perhaps.
want to go 5 years from now. I say 5 months from now. The headline I want to see on the cover of a magazine is CMOs to growth officers. I mean, because that is what we're bringing to the table. That is what we need to bring to the table, if you're not already doing it, is growth for a brand.
Perfect. I think nice and very interesting perspective on this. I thoroughly enjoyed the discussion today with you, Anjali.
Me too.
I think it's not one of those times that when we are talking about marketing in such a detail, but really enjoyed the session with you. Thanks for coming and being featured on FTA Global Marketing Stack. So to our audience, this was Ms. Anjali Gupta, founder of the Fractional CMO Company, who shared her perspective on fractional leadership and marketing. For such content, stay tuned and keep watching FTA Global Marketing Stack 2025. Thank you for your time.